The downtown high-rise came alive just before 7 a.m. Lights flickered on one floor at a time and the clatter of dress shoes began to echo in the marble lobby. No one paid much attention to the man behind the security desk. He wore a navy blue jacket, slightly too large at the shoulders, with building security stitched in white thread. His name tag said James. His posture was straight, his gaze steady. He watched everything. Executives entered through the revolving doors in waves, some nodding at him without eye contact, others brushing past like he wasn't there. Phones in hand, voices low and clipped, their minds were already 2 floors up in the boardroom. James buzzed in a delivery guy, nodded at a cleaner, and returned to his screen. His desk sat just outside the elevators, the perfect spot to see who mattered and who didn't. He had no briefcase, no assistant, no laptop. Just a walkie-talkie, a clipboard, and a keycard with more access than anyone else in the building knew. No one asked what he was doing there so early. They assumed he always was. By 7:45, the lobby grew louder. Laughter from mid-level managers, the clinking of travel mugs, sharp high heels across tile. The Friday morning strategy meeting was drawing everyone upstairs. Floor 32. Executive suite. 2 men in tailored suits passed by the desk. New guy, one muttered, glancing at James without slowing. No idea, the other replied, tapping his phone. He's just security. James didn't react. He heard the kind of thing often. The tone more than the words, dismissive, automatic. Not cruel. Just careless. He watched as the two waited for the elevator, their reflections sharp in the brass panels. One of them, Conrad, if he remembered right, had been pushing for expansion into the West Wing. Wanted his own floor. Had no idea who signed the final lease. The elevator opened. They stepped in without a glance back. A few minutes later, the assistant property manager, Rita, hurried through the doors. Early 30s, efficient, stressed. She spotted James, hesitated. Morning. You knew. James gave her a polite nod. Just filling in this week. Oh. Okay. Let me know if you need anything, she added, already distracted, flipping through her folder. He nodded again. She didn't ask his last name. Didn't ask which contractor hired him. Didn't notice that his badge had no expiration date. She disappeared upstairs. James checked the time. They'd find out soon enough. Floor 32 was glass, chrome, and cold air. The kind of space built to impress investors, not comfort employees. Conference room Alpha was already half full when Conrad and his colleague arrived. Suits lined the long walnut table, coffee steaming in front of each seat, tablets and portfolios arranged like armor. At the head of the table sat Helen Kerr, Vice President of Operations. Precise, sharp-eyed, and used to being the most powerful person in the room. She glanced at the wall clock. Where's Walter? She asked no one in particular. Running late, someone replied. Said he'd be here. Big announcement, right? Helen nodded, barely concealing her irritation. He wants to talk restructuring. That got a few raised eyebrows. Restructuring meant promotions for some, warnings for others. As conversation picked up, James stepped into the private service elevator. No one used it but top-level maintenance, senior contractors, and owners. His access card slid through the reader without delay. He ascended alone, the hum of the motor quiet. When the doors opened, he stepped into a hallway he knew well. He'd designed it. Outside the boardroom, he waited. Inside, Helen checked her phone again. I don't see why we're delaying this, she said. Let's go through the agenda. If Mr. Warren wants to make a dramatic entrance, he can do it after we've reviewed Q2. There were chuckles, cautious ones. Then came the soft knock. A junior staffer opened the door. James stepped in. Not a word was spoken, but several heads turned. Helen frowned. This area is private. Who let you? He held up his hand. I believe you're expecting Walter Warren. His voice was calm. Helen blinked, unsure she heard right. You're a... Yes. He stepped forward, unzipping the jacket slowly. Underneath, a collared shirt. Tailored. Subtle cufflinks. He pulled out a folder. Laid it flat on the table. My name is James Warren. Walter's my legal name. I go by my middle name. Easier that way. He looked around the room, expression unreadable. Let's talk about the future of this company. The shift in the room was immediate. No one said a word, but the silence was sharp. Conrad stared straight ahead, face blank. The woman beside him slowly lowered her coffee cup. Even Helen, always composed, sat back in her chair like she'd been pulled from a moving car. Walter let the silence breathe. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smiling either. Just steady. A few of them still hadn't fully processed it. The man they ignored in the lobby. The one they didn't make eye contact with. Now standing at the head of their table. Speaking with authority they hadn't earned. Helen finally found her voice. Mr. Warren, we weren't told. That was the point, he said. Calm even. He glanced at the projector. Mind if I start? No one objected. He tapped the keyboard and brought up the first slide, an organizational flowchart, sharp and color-coded. His name at the top. No debate. I've spent the last 2 weeks observing. Quietly. Not to test anyone. just to see how people operate when they think no one is watching. His eyes scanned the room. In the lobby, in the elevators, during meetings. You'd be surprised what people reveal when they believe they're speaking to someone who doesn't matter. Helen looked down. So did 3 others. James continued. This isn't about humiliation. I don't believe in that. But it is about clarity. Going forward, this company will be structured around 3 things: merit, humility, and transparency. He paused. If you're uncomfortable with that, it's time to reconsider your seat at this table. James let the words linger. Not a threat. Just truth. Around the table, reactions varied, most of them subtle. Eyes dropped. Throats cleared. One man, Gerald, from marketing, forced a tight smile and scribbled something in his notebook that he wouldn't look at again. Conrad sat motionless, his hand gripping the edge of the table. The tips of his ears were red. A few hours earlier, he'd dismissed James with a smirk. Now, he couldn't meet his eyes. Across from him, Tanya from compliance nodded slightly, more to herself than anyone else. She hadn't said a word during the earlier laughter about the new security guy. She remembered now. She hadn't laughed, but she hadn't said anything either. James continued flipping through the slides, but his voice was more deliberate now. Every sentence carried weight. This building, this company, it isn't about me, he said, gesturing at the logo in the corner of the screen. It's about what we stand for. And too many of you have been coasting behind titles instead of character. There was no anger in his tone. No accusation. Just disappointment, so quiet it stung. I've seen more respect from the overnight janitorial crew than I've seen in this room this morning. That landed harder than anything else. Helen shifted. Her posture lost some of its edge. James looked around again. Some of you are going to grow from this. Others might leave. That's your choice. He clicked to the final slide. A blank screen. This meeting's not about who I am. It's about who you've chosen to be when no one's watching. No one looked at each other. They were all thinking the same thing. They hadn't just underestimated him. They'd revealed themselves. The meeting ended without applause, without questions. Just the dull scrape of chairs and the soft thud of closed folders. People exited in clusters, quiet ones. A few offered nods to James on the way out, some respectful, others unsure. No one dared speak casually to him now. Conrad was one of the last to leave. He lingered near the door, hesitating like he might say something. But he didn't. Just nodded stiffly and walked out. James stayed behind, alone in the glass-walled room. He looked out over the city skyline. The morning haze was lifting. Sunlight reflected off neighboring buildings, sharp and gold. He didn't smile. There wasn't anything to celebrate yet. There were still policies to fix, people to reassess. What happened in that boardroom wasn't the end. It was the starting line. Downstairs, in the lobby, Rita sat behind the reception desk checking her email. When James entered the elevator lobby, she looked up. Her eyes widened slightly. She stood. Mr. Warren, I didn't realize. He held up a hand. You treated me with decency. That's enough. She blinked, then nodded, unsure if she felt relieved or ashamed. As he stepped into the elevator, a delivery man passed him, pushing a cart of coffee orders. Morning, the man said. James nodded. Morning. Then the elevator doors closed and he was gone. Back on floor 32, the mood had shifted. The usual buzz of conversation was gone. Offices that normally hummed with strategy and confidence were hushed. Doors were half closed, blinds drawn. In the break room, 2 junior staffers whispered near the coffee machine. You knew who he was? One asked. No. I thought he was with facilities. Same. Conrad told me not to waste time chatting with building help. Guess he's quiet now. They both went silent as Tanya walked in. She poured herself a cup of tea without a word, glanced at them, and left. At her desk, Tanya opened an email draft. She stared at the blank screen for a moment before typing. Mr. Warren, I didn't speak up when I should have. I won't make that mistake again. If there's anything I can do to help reshape the culture here, I want to be part of it. Tanya. She hovered over the send button, then clicked. In another office, Helen stood by her window, arms folded. Her assistant hovered nearby, silent, waiting. Finally, Helen spoke. Get me the last 6 months of staff evaluations. Quietly. I want to see who we've overlooked. The assistant nodded and left without asking more. Conrad, meanwhile, sat at his desk, unmoving. The blinds were still open. His reflection stared back at him in the dark glass, same suit, same tie, but not the same man he thought he was 2 hours ago. For the first time in years, he didn't know if he'd be here next quarter. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he deserved to be. Part 8, the first changes. By Monday, the shift was official. Emails went out under James Warren's name, clear, direct, brief. A new mentorship program. An anonymous reporting line for workplace behavior. And a note at the end that no one missed. Titles don't excuse conduct. How you treat others will matter more than what's printed on your business card. Some employees read it twice. A few read it out loud to themselves. At noon, James walked the halls of each floor, not with a crowd, not flanked by assistants. Alone. No one had to guess who he was now. The same face from the security desk. The same tone, just without the jacket. Most stood a little straighter when he passed. Some said hello cautiously. He returned each one with the same steady nod. At floor 27, he stopped by the janitorial break room. A few workers froze mid-lunch, unsure if they were about to be inspected. James just smiled and said, "Thanks for keeping the place standing." "You don't hear that enough." Then he left. Word spread quickly. Later that day, the executive meeting was smaller. Not everyone was invited back. No explanation was needed. Everyone understood. James sat at the head again. No slides this time. Just conversation. He spoke quietly, plainly. This company has money, reputation, reach. What it doesn't always have is memory. It forgets who keeps it moving, who gets ignored, who gets underestimated. He looked around the table. That stops here. No one disagreed. No one dared to. The first resignation came 2 days later. Not dramatic. Just a quiet email from Conrad. "I believe it's best I step down," it read. Not out of resentment, but clarity. He didn't show up to clean out his desk. Someone else boxed his things, mostly branded mugs, a plaque from an industry award, and a photo of him on a yacht with people who probably didn't remember his name. James didn't respond to the email. He didn't need to. People noticed, though. They noticed that no one tried to stop Conrad from leaving. They noticed the lack of whispered goodbyes or hallway speculation. His absence felt like air clearing. That same afternoon, Tanya received a meeting invite from James. It wasn't a group meeting. Just her. She stepped into the small, sunlit conference room a little unsure. James was already seated, his jacket off, a cup of tea beside him. He stood when she entered. "Thanks for coming." Tanya nodded. "Of course." He gestured for her to sit. "You sent me a message last week." "I did. It mattered." She blinked, surprised. "I wasn't sure you saw it." "I see more than people think," he said. "I'm building something here. I need people who aren't afraid to see what's wrong and say it out loud. I think that might be you." Tanya's eyes widened slightly. "You want me involved?" "Not just involved," James said, "invested." He slid a folder toward her. "New role. New responsibilities. Same salary, but more impact." She opened it. Her breath caught. "You don't have to say yes today," he said quietly. "But I think you already have." She closed the folder, sat straighter. "I'm in." Tanya's promotion spread fast. Not through memos or announcements. Through whispers, startled, speculative, often tinged with disbelief. "She just got here a year ago. She doesn't even lead a team. Did she know him before?" But the people whispering the loudest were the ones who had never spoken to her before the boardroom meeting. The ones who assumed quiet meant insignificant. Tanya heard the murmurs. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her office moved one floor up. Her badge access changed. And so did the looks she got in the elevator, less amused, more cautious. James noticed the tension. He always did. During their first check-in, he leaned back in his chair and asked, "How's the silence?" Tanya gave a small laugh. "Louder than before, somehow." "That means you're doing something right." He handed her a sheet of paper. It listed 5 names. Mid-level managers. No context. "I want you to talk to them," he said. "Ask questions. Not for punishment, just understanding. I trust your instinct." Tanya read the names. One of them had made a joke about her shoes in the elevator last month. Loud enough for his team to hear. Quiet enough to pass off as just kidding. She looked up. "What do I do if they lie?" James smiled faintly. "You'll know. Just listen to how they talk when they think they're safe." She folded the paper, nodded once. In the hall, as she passed the others who once ignored her, no one made jokes anymore. They were watching. But now so was she. The first person on Tanya's list was Michael Trent, sales, 11 years in. Known for big numbers and bigger ego. She scheduled a 15-minute, informal alignment chat. He accepted without hesitation, probably assuming it was about quotas. He arrived 2 minutes late, still finishing a call. "Sorry about that," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tanya didn't smile back. "That's fine. Let's start." He sank into the chair across from her like it was a formality. "So, what's this about?" She opened a notebook but didn't write. "Culture." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Culture?" "Yes. How things actually feel in the building, not how they look on a slide deck." Michael leaned back, arms crossed. "We hit our targets last quarter. People seem fine to me." Tanya let the silence stretch. He shifted. She finally asked, "How many people on your team know your assistant's last name?" He blinked. "What does that have to do with A? Or the name of the janitor who cleans your floor?" He stared at her, unsure if it was a test. "I'm not trying to embarrass you," she said, voice steady. "I'm trying to see if you've ever looked outside your reflection." His jaw tensed. "Look, I treat everyone here with respect." Tanya tilted her head slightly. "Respect isn't silent. It's seen. And heard. Ask your team if they feel safe speaking up around you. Then listen." Michael stood abruptly. "I didn't realize this was an interrogation." "It's not," she replied calmly. "It's a window." He left without another word. She marked a note beside his name. "Doesn't like mirrors." The next meeting was in 20 minutes. She was just getting started. Late afternoon. Floor 19. James stepped off the elevator alone and unannounced. People glanced up from desks. Conversations quieted. Some stood. Others just watched. He didn't rush. He walked slowly down the aisle, passing conference rooms, passing quiet apologies whispered under breath. A man at a desk straightened his tie. A woman minimized a shopping tab. James didn't stop until he reached the end. The back corner desk. Monica, payroll assistant. For years in. Her name was barely known outside her department, but James remembered her from his first week at the building. She was the only one who had asked if he wanted coffee. Now she looked up wide-eyed. "Mr. Warren," she stammered, standing halfway. "James," he corrected gently. "Mind if I sit?" She gestured quickly, clearing a second chair. "Of course. I assure." He sat down, leaning slightly forward. "You've seen a lot from this corner. Heard a lot too." She hesitated, then nodded. "I want to know what people don't say in meetings," he said. The hallway comments. The eye rolls. Who gets cut off mid-sentence? Her eyes flicked around, unsure. "You really want that?" "I need it." She swallowed. "There's a list. I'd appreciate it." For the next 10 minutes, she spoke carefully. Slowly. Not out of fear, but caution, like someone who'd been dismissed too many times to assume words had weight. James never interrupted. At the end, she looked down. "I didn't mean to gossip." "You didn't," he said. "You told the truth." As he stood to leave, she whispered, "I almost quit last year." "Why didn't you?" "You." He paused. "But you didn't know who I was." She shook her head. "Didn't have to." He gave a small nod, then walked back toward the elevator, quiet. This floor wouldn't be overlooked again. The next leadership meeting was full, but quiet. No side talk. No scrolling under the table. They all knew why they were there. James stood at the front, arms relaxed, a file in his hand. "Thank you all for being here." He didn't need a projector this time. This isn't a presentation. It's a reckoning. He opened the folder and laid out a list on the table. These are the results of the department audit. Tanya conducted most of the conversations. People who hadn't been asked anything in years were finally listened to. He let the statement breathe. "I won't read what they said aloud. You already know if you're on this list. And if you don't, maybe that's part of the problem." Across the table, a few faces tightened. One looked away completely. James turned to Tanya. "Anything you want to add?" She looked up calm. "The culture here isn't broken. It's ignored. The harm doesn't come from chaos, it comes from silence." Some nodded. Some folded their arms. James stepped forward again. "Effective next week, 3 managers will be reassigned. 1 will be let go. And all department heads will complete a feedback training that doesn't just teach how to listen, it tests it." Someone opened their mouth, maybe to object, but closed it again. James continued. "This isn't punishment. It's maintenance. You don't let a leak keep dripping because the floor still looks clean." He picked up the folder. "I told you on day 1, how you treat people matters more than your title." His eyes moved slowly across the room. "Consider this your mirror." By the following week, the building felt different. Not louder. Not tense. Just aware. Morning greetings were no longer mumbled. People held elevator doors more often. Conversations happened in open spaces instead of behind closed ones. Tanya noticed a junior analyst speaking up in a meeting without glancing for permission. No one interrupted him. Monica's name showed up on a new cross-functional committee, nominated by 2 department heads. In the cafeteria, someone said thank you to the dishwasher loud enough for others to hear. Small things. Things that hadn't happened before. Even the silence had changed. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was listening. James kept walking the building. Always without warning. Not to catch people off guard, but to remind them presence wasn't just a formality. During one of those walks, he passed Gerald from marketing. Gerald, who had laughed the loudest during the security guy assumptions that first morning. He stood as James approached. "Mr. Warren," Gerald said, nervous but not defensive. "I've been thinking a lot about how I show up here. How I've shown up in the past." James looked at him calmly. "And? I want to change that. I already started a mentorship circle. Listening more. Calling things out when they're off." James gave a small nod. "Good." He started to walk away, but paused. "You don't earn trust back all at once," James said over his shoulder. "But you can stop losing it one decision at a time." Then he kept walking. Down the hall, into the stairwell. Same quiet shoes. Same steady pace. But everyone knew now, he wasn't just security. He was watching the foundation. And making sure it held. 3 months later, the building ran differently. Turnover was down. Feedback was up. Employees who used to stay invisible now ran initiatives, led meetings, got credit. There was no big memo, no corporate video patting itself on the back. Just change, unfolding the way real change does quietly, consistently until it's the new normal. James still kept his morning walks. No entourage. No announcement. Sometimes he stopped to talk. Sometimes he didn't. But his presence was always noticed. One morning, as he entered through the front doors, a new hire, barely 2 weeks in, was standing near the security desk, looking confused. James walked over. You okay? He asked. The young man blinked. Oh yeah. Just trying to find the finance training room. Nobody really told me where to go. James smiled. I can walk you there. The young man hesitated. Aren't you someone important? James shrugged lightly. Depends on who's asking. They rode the elevator together, chatting easily. No tension. At floor 15, as the doors opened, the new hire turned and said, thanks. Really? No problem, James replied. Just remember, this place works best when you treat everyone like they matter. Even if you don't know who they are yet. The young man nodded, thoughtful. James stepped back into the elevator alone. As the doors closed, his reflection stared back at him. Not a badge. Not a title. Just a man who'd once been ignored. And made sure no one else would be.